call, please.
Councilmember Bowie. Council President Naker.
Here.
Councilmember Jost.
Here.
Councilmember Coleman.
Here.
Council Vice President Kim. Councilmember Yang. Councilmember Johnson. Seeing 4 present, 3 absent, Councilmember Johnson is excused.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Policy Committee meeting of the week. We have 2 items on our agenda. The first one is a presentation on the bike rack permit program, and we are pleased to welcome Jimmy Schumacher from Public Works to give that presentation. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jimmy Schumacher. I'm in the Department of Public Works. I'm here today to talk with you about kind of formalizing something that we've been trying to formalize for quite some time that will allow kind of custom or branded bike racks in the right-of-way. So I have a pretty short presentation. Again, this is something we'll probably come to council for a new ordinance to permit these. And it's something that has existed in the right-of-way, but it's kind of been sort of muddy, to be honest, about how this has worked in the past. And so we're really just trying to formalize the program. I don't consider this to be very controversial at all. It's something we get asked for, with some regularity from district councils and business districts. Hey, I want a snazzy branded bike rack in front of my business. And up to this point, it's been, like I said, a little bit muddy on how we've done this. And so this is really just formalizing a program. So I want to talk about the goals and outcomes of such a permit. And I'm calling it a permit, but it's almost kind of a program. And then just as kind of a refresher, maybe setting the table about how and where you might see bike racks in the city. And specific when it comes to the custom bike racks, how we've done it in the past and how we'd like to do it in the future. So just as a reminder, this is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about kind of a branded or custom bike rack. This is an example that currently exists at a few locations in Highland Park, along Ford Parkway and kind of Ford Parkway in Cleveland. But also there's some other areas. Union Park has a few of these. The North End has a few of these. But then there are also businesses that maybe, I think if you were to drive on Grand, you'd see a cat cafe, and you'd see some branded or custom bike racks out in front. So the goal of this program is to get more bike racks out on the street. There are businesses that are asking for this, and that they're for public use. It's not just for that business. So they're willing to fund this and put them in the public right-of-way. And really this is permitting private installation in the public right-of-way. So it's kind of like a Venn diagram. We're trying to allow this, and we haven't really been able to date. It would kind of having this permit or the program would allow us to track installations. So sometimes, to be honest, they've shown up on the street, and it would be nice if we could kind of track them. And then specifically, I think that the council might be interested in, you all know, of course, you came up with and developed and funded the Commercial Corridor Organization Assistance Program, CCOPE.
We're working on a different name.
Okay. I struggle with it too, CCOPE. And so what kind of the impetus for coming here is, or kind of the kick in the pants to actually get this formalized, is because there are new dollars that are given to commercial corridors and business organizations. And a lot of them say, hey, now we have this money, I'd love to put some of these custom bike racks. And so, again, this has been something that we've wanted to do for a while, and this new program that you all funded is kind of giving us the encouragement to formalize it. Again, you know all about this. One of the eligible activities or funding criteria or expenses. One of the eligible expenses is for beautification on corridors, and this is one of those things, custom branded bike racks. So again, I think as this program continues, we will probably see more business organizations saying, hey, I'd love to do this. I really love these custom branded bike racks. And we would, as a city, like to be able to say, yes, this is how you do it. So just as a reminder, I want to take a step back and just say, you might see bike racks all over the city. Just very quickly, this is on Payne in Ward 6. Here you see a couple bike racks. These are just standard city kind of boring bike racks. They're just kind of a stainless steel hoop. They serve the purpose just fine. We are pretty good at that. We have a program already for that. A business like Cookie Cart or Brunson's up the block can say, hey, I'd love to have a bike rack. It doesn't need to be a fancy one. And I go out and I look at the site, make sure there's space, and then we actually purchase those kind of boring bike racks and they get installed by city forces. This is a little bit different, the kind of custom thing. They would go purchase it and they would have a private installer. Again, that's what the permit is hoping to allow.
Mr. Shoemaker, just a quick clarifying question. So for those, the current state, when it's on public property, but the business requests it, you said we purchase it, so it's completely publicly funded?
Correct.
In that case?
Yep.
And are those funds, I know they're never unlimited, but we have enough of those for any business that would request that funding if they wanted a bike rack?
We're really limited, not really by funding, but by kind of our capacity as staff to install those. And that's why this is kind of a unique, what I'm talking about today is this is a unique program where they can hire a private installer. If they have 20 of these branded bike racks that they've purchased, we don't really have the internal capacity to keep up with that and do that all over, especially with this new C-COPE funding source. So this permit is allowing them to say, oh, hey, here's a private installer. We'll buy the custom rack, and then we'll pay a private installer to install them. But yes, we have a small pot of money in Public Works that is used for various things, including these kind of standard bike racks. And so here are a few examples on screen. This is in front of OBS in Ward 7. This is on Selby, kind of Cathedral Hill in the middle, and then right outside of City Hall. And so, like I said, it comes in a request for the business. I go out and look and make sure there's space and there's concrete, and then I mark them, and then our crews go and install them. But that's not what I'm talking about today. There's also just, to kind of capture the universe, there's also private property. On private property, people can do whatever they want. You could install any bike rack. So this is in front of SPPS, this is in front of my Menards, and then this is in front of a church in kind of Summit Hill.
I love my Menards.
Oh, yeah.
Ms. Jost had a question.
Thank you. It's also my Menards.
Okay.
So I was looking ahead at one of your slides. So when these are getting installed by a private installer, it says that Public Works reviews the design. So does that mean that Public Works is, since this is going to be attached to the public sidewalk that belongs to the city, they're making sure that it's anchored in a way that's not going to damage the sidewalk, basically? Is that correct?
Yep, that's a big part of it. Yeah. Like I said, in this slide, Councilmember Jost, there are these custom racks that have shown up across the city. Mm-hmm. And for a variety of reasons, it used to be an installer that was local that we kind of trusted, and they were qualified to do this. And that's where you see a lot of these racks have shown up. Mm-hmm. There are a couple on this photo that kind of showed up, like I said, without us knowing about it. And so we want to make sure that someone isn't drilling into the sidewalk and maybe hits a utility line underneath the sidewalk or damages the sidewalk panel. Mm-hmm. So this permit, and that has been a concern of ours in the past. When we see one show up on the street, it's like, how did that show up? Mm-hmm. Did someone just with a drill go out and do it? Is that a concern for us? So we, like I said, about 5 years ago when some of them in Highland and in the North End showed up, we actually worked with a private installer, and that worked. They have since moved to Florida. So they don't exist anymore. And so now that they're gone, we have gotten requests over the years like, hey, I want one of these. I saw this in the North End. I saw this in Highland. Where do I get one? Mm-hmm. And we've kind of had to say we don't really have a good way to permit this. Mm-hmm. And so what's happened is sometimes they'll just show up, and we don't want that. Right. So we're really just trying to create the program that allows this.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great.
Yeah. Okay, so like I said, for a variety of reasons, these are problematic, the way that these have shown up. And then, so this new approach would, like I said, allow private parties, so district councils, business organizations, really even just a business, any business, to find competitive prices from qualified installers. We want to make sure that the racks are being installed by a qualified installer, like I said, insured. So if they do hit a underground utility line, that they're insured. Again, this program and permit would allow staff, me, to document where these are. We also have kind of an inventory of bike racks across the city, and they show up, and we haven't documented where those are. Another thing to your point, Councilmember Jost, is that they are sited correctly. A lot of times bike racks are installed by someone and they end up right next to a street light pole, and it's like, okay, we can't even use this. So creating this permit and the process that goes into me going out there and making sure that they're in the right place means that they'll be sited correctly and ultimately more easy to use for someone biking. And then designed correctly, that's kind of a nuance, but some bike racks, you see them out on the street and they're actually really not that easy to use. It's like you kind of have to fumble to lock to it. So again, this permit would allow us to say, let's see your custom rack and make sure it's designed in a way that people can use them and it's not complicated. Yeah?
Ms. Coleman.
I had a question about the design piece. Very pro all of this. It's great. It seems to me that just like the plain silver metal bars would allow more bike, they just seem way easier than these very pretty Highland Park ones. Do we see like a decrease in how many bikes can be attached to one of these racks, or like, is there a little bit of a trade-off between a nice design and efficiency?
Council President, Councilmember Coleman, yes, and that is kind of, we've actually heard, for example, in some of the ones in Highland, the design that was used on those in Highland, it's kind of a pain actually to lock your bike to, which is like going against what we would like. You can kind of see in this example, like, where do you put your lock? And so I think, again, part of this program would say, okay, Highland District Council or whomever, let's see the design that you want to use, that you want a fabricator to make, and let's make sure that it's actually user-friendly and doesn't cause problems. So, we don't really track the amount that any single rack will use. I would say, just kind of candidly, the standard boring bike rack is probably the easiest to use. But on the other hand, it's a trade-off. There's some branding and kind of some, bring more neighborhood identity, I guess. We're definitely willing to allow it, and I think the designs can be such that they allow a bike to be easily parked.
Ms. Yang.
Thank you. Well, speaking about the designs, I'm just wondering if there was a design that maybe a community group or just some private business owner they wanted to install, but then the design wasn't appropriate. Is that something that you all would make the decision on, like whether they can have a design like that? Yeah,
Council President, and Councilmember, we haven't run into those yet. Maybe there's something out there, nothing that I've ever seen, but that's definitely like the way that it's worked now, kind of this gray area. They could conceivably design something that would be inappropriate or against city values and could end up on the street. I will say that there's no guarantee someone doesn't do that again. Like, there's no, enforcement arm that's going around cruising looking for bike racks. The hope is that this will be easier to do and therefore would kind of cut that off, Does that answer your question?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it does a bit. I was just thinking of that. I mean, I haven't heard of issues like that happening either, but, when it comes to designs, like, people can sometimes have different thoughts on what that looks like, or like what you said, like values too. So I'm just trying to understand, like, what would happen in a situation like that.
Yeah, if a bike rack showed up in the public right-of-way and it was inappropriate or something, the city could definitely go and remove it. So
Okay.
That's what we would do.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, just have a couple more slides here. So, where was I here? Yeah, the other thing is, there is some confusion that if a bike rack is purchased by a private entity and installed in the public right-of-way, like, who owns it? What happens if that business moves away and then the new business says, oh, I don't like this or something? This process would say once installed, so even if a district council purchases them, installs them, the process would articulate that it now becomes city property once installed. And that's just how, I think that's the cleanest. We've thought a lot about this, like that's how we want to do it. And so that would be very clearly outlined, like you as a district council are purchasing them, you are installing them with this permit, and then they become property of the city. And then again, I mentioned kind of staff capacity. We install maybe, I would say, 20 of the boring bike racks every year, give or take. But you know, there's if a district council or something said, I'm going to order 24 of these and put them all over the area, we probably couldn't keep up with that. We just have too many other priorities. And so this permit allows them to go out and find their installer and kind of knock them all out. Again, so this is just kind of in the weeds, but it'd be kind of a two-part system, and really what we're asking City Council to weigh in is an ordinance that would allow this permit. And this is kind of a very specific, it's a permit that allows the installation in the public right-of-way. There's another half of this, it would be kind of an informal agreement, it would just be kind of an administrative agreement, that's what's on the left. So we would approve the locations of the racks, we would approve the design of the racks, and then I'm using district council as an example. District council would gift those to the city once installed. They will work with a fabricator. There are plenty of companies that make custom bike racks. And then they will hire the installer. And, you know, there's already some companies that said, hey, you know, we want to be your installer. And then we will maintain them in the future because they will become ours to own.
Ms. Jost.
I have another question about when they get gifted to the city, does that require any council action to accept them?
You know, Council President, Council Member, I think so. I don't know that for sure. I see stuff on the council agenda frequently that says, you know, the city will accept this gift. I think so. Mm-hmm. That's something I need to talk a little bit more with the attorney's office. I'd love to hear your input if you have some. We haven't crossed that yet. But I'm imagining a district council will order these, will say, hey, you got to gift these to the city, mm-hmm. and then does that need to take some council action? I don't know the answer to that, but I think so.
I think that was why I asked the question. It feels like the answer is yes, and I think, you know, depending on how many of these we get, maybe it's not going to be a ton of these coming through council, which would probably be fine, but if there's also any way to simplify it so we could, maybe we can just pass one type of action that gives someone the authority to accept them, but it also feels like maybe it's a question for OFS, because if we are accepting sort of money or some type of property, that maybe it does just require action every time, but yeah, we can.
Yeah, I'm really interested to hear your input on that. I'm imagining a scenario where, you know, a district council orders 10 of them, and they're like, oh wait, you know, we've done the gift to the city council. Oh wait, we want 2 more, and then do they need to come back for those 2 more? It seems like I do know that the C-COPE program is kind of collectively for this last round of funding. Maybe is, you know, that's a PED program, is trying to like maybe put in one big order.
Right.
So I think that would be an efficient way of doing things, that like, you know, all of the racks for all of the business corridors get kind of gifted at once, but definitely interested in like an efficient way to do that.
Ms. Bowie.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you so much, Jimmy. Is it Shoemaker or Schumacher?
It is Shoemaker.
Shoemaker,
yes,
okay.
Yes.
I got it wrong at the beginning.
Okay.
Good to see you
Thank
here.
you. Good to see you.
I'm excited for this policy review. I have a question particularly around, you mentioned the C-COP or the commercial corridor grant program. Are you, and excuse me, I missed the beginning part of it. I don't know if, you know, want to steal your thunder in terms of you explaining that again. But are you seeing this grant program, like a portion of those funds being designated to something like this, to that bike permit? And do you have like a ballpark of, you know, how much you think should be, I guess, granted, or is it just more so like an eligibility? Like if a district council wants to purchase these bike racks, that they're allowed to through this grant?
Sure, Council President, Councilmember Bowie. Yes, that's a great question. So we are seeing, I was in a meeting just last week with all of the commercial corridors, that were interested in bike parking. And there were maybe, I think there are 18 of the commercial corridors, and I think maybe 5 or 6 were on the call. And those were the ones that were interested in, kind of raised their hand and said, hey, I want to spend some of my money on these branded bike racks. So, maybe 5 of the 18, but my understanding is that this is a program that hopefully will continue. And so we could see more of them. We could see any one of the corridors want to add more. This is the neighborhood beautification. This would fall into that category. I don't have a great sense of the cost. I mean, in my experience with ordering just kind of the standard bike rack, I think they're like $180 a piece for the standard bike rack. Now, once you get into like the branding, I think, that obviously would cost a little bit more. But they are kind of shopping around to different vendors to say, hey, if we ordered 50 of these and there were 5 different designs, could we get a price break, for example? So did that answer all your questions?
Yeah,
what was your other question?
That's helpful. I do have another question, a follow-up question. So with the proposal for a permit, do you have a ballpark, particularly around like how much the permit would cost? Because I think that's another thing too, where we just want to make sure it's accessible as possible.
Yes, thank you, Council President, Councilmember Louie. I don't have a sense of that yet. We still need to create the permit, but I can definitely report back on what it would cost. The idea is that the installer, just like this is considered a very minor construction activity. It's not much. It's literally mounting some of the bike racks. And I think there are kind of standard fees for something like this. But yes, a business organization is spending their money on putting something in the public right of way. So I agree with you that we'd want to make this. These will be available to the public, not just the business. So I agree with you that we'd want to make this as accessible as possible. It's a very minor construction activity. So I can get back to you on that for sure as we develop the permit.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And Mr. Shoemaker, sort of to the questions that my colleagues have been asking, I do think it's worth just making sure that the agreement is really carefully thought through, especially with regard to maintenance in the future.
Okay.
I know we sometimes run into this with public art where ownership is unclear and our responsibility to maintain the art in its original form is unclear. And I could imagine, a very stylized bike rack that, to your point, the manufacturer moves to Florida. Is it on us going forward to replicate what was there or not? I would imagine not, but I just want to make sure the expectations on us are clear if we're taking ownership of something that might be difficult to replicate. And I would also say just to consider whether or not the gifting to the city is important to us to happen right away, or whether we want that ownership to live with the responsible party as long as they are around, and maybe there's some reverter to the city if at some point the district council can't or won't, or the business can't or won't maintain it. I'm just thinking through, especially if it's the district council or the business that has the contract with the installer originally, it might be just easier for them to be the ones who reach out if it's damaged and needs to be replaced rather than for us to get involved. And obviously that brings costs to us as well that we're not foreseeing right now. So maybe the reverting to us is sort of a last resort rather than an immediate gift that happens. All things I would defer to your expertise on, but I think these questions are all kind of a nature like that, thinking about that future state.
Council President, thanks. Yes, one thing that's not shown on screen here is, to your point, like we've thought about, like, okay, say someone installs this beautiful new custom rack, a car happens to jump the curb and runs into it, right? We don't want that to happen. Ideally, the siting is such that won't happen. But that could happen. And we have thought about, and I don't know if we formalized it yet, that the city, if we own it, we will replace that, but we will replace that with a standard boring rack, which, bike racks are supposed to be pretty sturdy. They probably don't require as much maintenance. But to your point, yes, that is a responsibility that the city is taking on. And so what we had planned to have in this kind of agreement is that once gifted to the city, the city will take on ownership and maintenance, but we will not replace it with, we're not going to stock a whole handful of some branded bike rack for 20 years from now when that gets struck by a car and knocked down. The idea is we would replace it, still offer a place to park your bike, but not the custom rack. So that is one thing that we have thought about.
That's helpful. Thanks.
Yeah.
I see Ms. Coleman had a question.
Just a couple of more questions, sorry, on this line. I'm curious if you know what the average lifespan of a bike rack is, and also, like, the maintenance. So I'm thinking if it gets damaged, that's the primary way in which we have to maintain bike racks. Is there anything else that we're talking about when we talk about maintenance in the future?
Council President, Councilmember Coleman, I don't know the average lifespan of a bike rack.
So fair.
One thing that can happen that we've noticed outside, I'd say the most common thing is like, something that's been clearing snow, like a bobcat runs into one downtown. I don't know if there's tons of examples of that, but that could be one. A parked car kind of is backing up and hops the curb and backs into one. Again, there aren't a ton of instances of that. The other thing is if they're paint, like the ones that we install, the boring ones, are just galvanized steel. So they don't rust and they don't require repainting. We've heard a couple of people say, oh, this bike rack that's been there for 10 years is flaking paint. Can you guys come out and repaint it? That is a maintenance burden. And so we have started to install racks that are not painted. So to your point, if district council or a business organization wants a colorful branded bike rack, they can do that. But painting is probably the next thing. It's not something that requires every year painting. I don't know the answer how long that paint lasts, but eventually it'll flake off. Yeah.
I think I was just going to add to Councilmember Coleman's comments. It sounds like if they're like a stainless steel or galvanized that can resist corrosion, they should last for. They could last for several decades. I think when it comes to the maintenance, maybe what would be good to think about is the aesthetic maintenance versus more so structural and functional maintenance. If the paint is chipping, the bike rack still works. Is Public Works required to go out there and fix it? But if the steel is corroding or if it gets hit or vandalized, then that seems like that would be more appropriate maintenance for us to handle.
Council President, Councilmember Jost, yes, I agree. We have started to install, this is really getting in the weeds, we have started to install plastic spacers between the anchor and the bike rack itself, which resists some of that metal on metal corrosion. So that's one thing that we can do. We also install tamper-proof bolts on each leg, so someone can't just come out there and use a socket wrench and take the bike rack and take the bike. But you're right. If it gets damaged such that someone could kind of pull it loose, we would go out and cut that one out and reinstall it. Because that, to your point, that eliminates the function of the bike rack to securely lock your bike to. Things like chipping paint, the bike rack still functions. I've heard maybe one business say, hey, can you come out and paint this rack? That rack was on Grand Avenue. It was pulled when we reconstructed Grand, and a new rack was put in its place.
Right. Ms. Yang.
Thank you. I just have a last couple of questions. Jimmy, I'm wondering if you can break down for us, well, I know you said earlier you don't have an amount for what the permit cost would be, but can you explain what would the fee be for? Is it recouping the costs of the labor for our public works staff going out there trying to document things? Because if it's being installed by a private contractor, then it seems like, well, I'm just trying to understand, what would the cost be for? And then is this a one-time permit fee, or would there be some ongoing costs for whoever wants to get the permit?
Council President, Councilmember Yang, you're right. There is not, we are using a private installer, so the installation is not being funded by us. We haven't, to be honest, we haven't thought a lot about the cost yet. I would have to, we would talk to our right-of-way division who handles permits. I agree with you that, it's seemingly a one-time operation. There are some things that are permitted, you have to renew your permit every year. I don't know. I can't imagine that would be fair to ask someone to especially if it's then gifted to the city after installation. So my hope is that we can keep this permit fee pretty minimal, but like I said, I can report back on that.
Yeah,
Sounds like that's a priority for you all.
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, I would like to see it be a very minimal fee too.
Yeah.
I think that trying to incentivize district councils and businesses to put up the bike racks would be a huge win for us. And so doing that by keeping the costs very low would be really important. If my question would be is there a need for a fee at all? If not, then I personally would be okay without having that. I think it seems like it's more important for Public Works to just make sure that you're able to document where these bike racks are. And if it's suddenly our property, then we're in charge of trying to do the replacement for the bike rack. And so, maybe it makes sense to keep a fee there. I'm not sure, but I'm just throwing it out there that if there doesn't seem to be a need for a fee or justification for a fee, that I would also be very supportive of not having a fee too. But I'll look to you all for guidance on that.
Councilmember Yang, great. Yeah, I can report back on that once we get down the road of a permit.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I would just jump in to say, from my perspective, I think it's important that we cover our costs for doing any work. So I agree with Ms. Yang, we should keep it as low as possible, but I would want to make sure that the department is being compensated for any work that you're putting in that you can't put in on something else. And I think we're not able to charge a fee beyond the cost of our work,
Okay.
is my understanding. So hopefully that's already baked in. But Ms. Bowie.
Thank you, Council President, and just, echoing that point that you made. I'm just looking at the slide, particularly around what our public right-of-way process is, and it does look like it is staff-led. So even if a business was to request, it looks like the staff is the one who's assessing the site and also installing the racks. So if we can get a snapshot of how much does that cost, because I imagine that would help at least create a projected cost for the district councils.
Council President, Councilmember Bowie, yes, that's a great point. We can, when I go out, just kind of, again, the standard boring racks, I go out and look at the site, I make sure there's room, I put 2 little dots on the ground with kind of marking spray, and then our traffic operations division comes kind of behind me and then installs them. And we get kind of an internal bill from traffic operations, and it shows X amount of racks cost this much. So we could do some math to find out generally, how much it costs. The installation of this, again, will be, obviously privately funded. So really there's the administrative task of kind of issuing the permit. I can talk to right of way about how long, what that takes. And then there would still be some work on my end to go out and site the racks to make sure they're in the appropriate spot. But yeah, there is some information we can use to kind of, do some reverse engineering on costs.
And just a follow-up question, can you share what are all the staff that's assigned to installation? I know Public Works has a huge department, but if you can just list what are our city staff that's assigned to it. I don't know what the actual terms are, but if you can list that.
Sure, yeah, Council President, Councilmember Bowie. It's basically when we do one for a business that the city funds, again, just kind of the standard boring rack. I usually get kind of an email with a standard form that's online. If you were to go to stpaul.gov/bike parking, you'd see this form under neighborhood bike parking program. And it's just a very simple one-pager, a business, say Ace Hardware. They say Ace Hardware, here's the contact, here's the address. I would like X amount of racks outside of my business. And then I go out, I go out and look at the site and make sure that there's space in the boulevard, make sure there's concrete. We can't install a rack into a grass boulevard, obviously. And then I go and mark them, and then I send that list of all of the racks that I've marked over the city to our traffic operations division in Public Works. And I placed the order to the vendor. We've used a Minnesota company that the past couple years, the racks get shipped from there to traffic operations on Dale Street, our Public Works warehouse. And then I send the list. Traffic operations go out when they have the time and install those racks in the field. So it's really me and a few staff that I've worked with in traffic operations.
Got it, thank you.
Yeah.
So it sounds like a one-man show here.
Well, kind of.
I see Ms. Jost, and then we have an entire presentation about our climate action resilience plan, and we've spent a lot of time on this, a very small program,
Yes,
because we care and we have a lot of questions. So I just want to make sure we're balancing our time
I
appropriately.
was
So I
not
think
anticipating this much interest.
no,
but
you're doing
happy to have
beautifully.
it.
After Ms. Jost, I think we will try to move you along, though. So
Okay.
Ms. Jost.
I was just gonna, thank you, Council President and Mr. Shoemaker. I was just gonna add to Councilmember Bowie's question that it sounds like that was for the very basic rack that has already been, it's like a proprietary rack. It's already been designed and approved. But when we start looking at these custom racks that Public Works has to approve the design, which maybe would require some minimal engineering review, that would add another person or more effort.
Still me.
It's still you, okay.
Council President, Councilmember Jost. No, yes, that is true. There would be some, I would work with, the idea is that we eliminate the amount of back and forth. And I've told this to some of the district councils that, it can't be some big, huge spiral bike rack. It's going to be kind of boring. It's going to be like the ones that you see that I've shown on screen. So really what I will be looking for is, will this function? Will it be easy to lock to? I don't expect a lot of design iteration and time spent on that. Okay. But this is the first time we've done it, so we shall see, I guess.
I think, I'll just add it. I did imagine that maybe there could be bike racks that are more substantial than that, like more artistic and big. And so I guess maybe making sure that district councils and folks know that that's not really feasible would be important too.
Council President, Councilmember, yes, there is some great guidance out there, not developed specifically by us, by APBP, the American Professional Bike and Pedestrian Planners, that has some really great guidance on what is good bike parking and what is bad, because there are a lot of examples of bad bike parking and bad bike racks that are totally unfunctional. So the idea is that we would provide some resources to point people in the right direction so they're not going down some path that we wouldn't approve anyways.
Cool.
Great. Well, is there any other information you haven't shared with us to conclude?
Council President, no. Thank you very much for having me here today.
We are really grateful for your time, Mr. Shoemaker, and I just want to say this is the platonic form of a policy session. This is what we want, because what you've done here today is you've come and presented an idea and gotten feedback, hopefully that was helpful from us on different considerations as you prepare an ordinance for consideration, rather than sort of having the ordinance come for first reading and having a staff report at that point. So I just want to note that this is exactly what we're hoping to do more of with the administration, to have this opportunity for back and forth prior to legislation moving forward, so thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, this is, I was wondering what exactly I'm
doing
here today.
That's fair.
And so I'm really glad to have that feedback, and I'll share that with others in the department to make sure that this is to make sure everybody knows that this is a really good avenue for kind of developing this stuff.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Looking forward to seeing the draft, and it sounds like you might have a lot of willing sponsors of it around this table.
Great. Okay.
All right, we will do a hard pivot, not really hard pivot, a soft pivot. It's related to our climate action plan, and want to welcome up Liz Boyer and team to take us away.
I didn't. Pleased to hear that was.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you.
You're good.
All right. Council President Naker, council members, good morning. My name is Liz Boyer. I serve as the Climate Action Coordinator for the city. This is a position that is seated in the Office of Financial Services. And I am really excited to be here today to share this draft plan with you. We've been working really hard on it over the last year. We've had some great community conversations. We've had great conversations across city departments, and I'm really proud of the draft that is here in front of you today. And I'm also really happy to hear you say that What we're trying to do is bring it to you in this initial kind of form and get your feedback and get your thoughts and get your questions. It's a lot. There's a lot in this plan. And honestly, we could spend, an hour on any one of these topics. So first of all, before we get too far into it, though, I would like to introduce my colleagues who are here today. Quick reminder that in the city of St. Paul, we have a decentralized climate and resilience staffing structure. This was established under Mayor Carter's administration and Chief Resilience Officer Russ Stark, who instead of kind of standing up a climate or sustainability office, we decided to embed folks in the departments where that work is happening. And we all kind of were loosely then directed by the Chief Resilience Officer in the mayor's administration. Now, Mayor Herr has selected a different staffing structure for her administration, and they've already been, Mayor Herr and the assistant mayors have been really great partners with us in figuring out how we can adapt this structure that was established under a different administration with her. So quickly, Cecilia Govrick, so there's 5 of us who consider ourselves to be what I would call climate core, and we're across different departments in the city. So Cecilia Govrick is our energy coordinator. She's with me in the Office of Financial Services. She manages the energy use and energy efficiency of our city-owned and operated properties. Then we have Erin Kaiser here, who is in Public Works. She is, what's your actual title? EV charging and electric car share program coordinator. She manages our EV car share and the charging, and she also is starting to kind of dip her toe a little bit more into shared mobility, a little bit more across the department. Behind Erin, we have Kurt Schultz, who is our clean energy manager. He's in planning and economic development, a little bit more on the outward-facing energy use and sustainability, and just kind of, he's been here for a real long time, so it's really great. We can always say, how did this used to be? Can you tell me how is this? So that's another really great feature of. On the other hand, we have Dave Schrader here, who is our newest Climate Corps team member. Resilience and Housing Program Specialist is his title, and he oversees the Power of Home and Healthy Homes programs, which we'll talk more about in a minute. Okay, so first of all, my goal here today is to provide some context on climate planning and climate action work in the city of St. Paul, share a little bit more about our progress in the 5 years since the original CARP was adopted, give you a kind of a broad outline of the structure of the plan that's in front of you, and hopefully that will make it easier for you to review the plan. We're really eager for your thoughts and your feedback and your questions, and I know you just got this, and there's a lot there. So like I say, we're trying just to kind of set it up here and looking forward to staying in conversation. All right, so our currently adopted CARP plan was adopted in 2019. It was built on the Strategic Framework for Community Resiliency, which was adopted under Mayor Chris Coleman's administration, actually, in 2016. So Mayor Carter came in, and the currently adopted plan was built on that. The overall goals of the current plan are to be net zero greenhouse gas emissions community-wide by 2050, net zero in city operations by 2030. There are over 170 actions in the CARP. More on that in a minute. So you can see here that we have made progress on our emissions reductions in the city of St. Paul. This is a screenshot of our climate action dashboard. This is our public-facing tracking and communication and information sharing tool where we report out on our climate actions. About 67% of our overall greenhouse gas emissions in the city are from buildings. The next biggest amount of emissions is transportation, which is about 32% of our emissions citywide. So I'm going to start with giving you some updates on emissions reduction work that we have done in our buildings. This is our city buildings and operations decarbonization slide here with some progress. So this is Cecilia Govrick's program area. She has just completed a really comprehensive decarbonization plan to help give us a roadmap on how we can decarbonize all of our city-owned and operated buildings. Not to intimidate you, but that plan alone is like this thick. She's got them on her desk. She's really excited to share them with you and get them off of her desk. So more on that to come as well. We have made progress on our city-owned and operated buildings. We have about a 46% reduction from the 2015 baseline. The next step in that decarbonization plan, there are specific electrification plans for about 11 of our buildings. We're adding more on-site solar. She keeps getting all these grants that she applies for, so we're working to implement the projects that are funded through those grants. Some specific examples, geothermal going in at Como. In the middle there is rooftop solar at the North End Community Center. The new Hamlin Library also is going to have geothermal. We also are working on our city fleet conversion. The city's first all-electric fire engine was put into service last year. We're installing level 2 chargers at several city locations in order to be able to service and charge EV vehicles when we're able to purchase them. We also are in the midst of developing a fleet decarbonization plan for what would be our comprehensive roadmap for converting as many of our vehicles as possible to EVs. So sort of stepping back then to citywide initiatives, the Power of Home and Healthy Homes, which you all approved funding for in the 2025 and 2026 budget, thank you for that, is to help weatherize and electrify homes of energy-burdened homeowners. We could reduce our emissions just by using what we already use more efficiently, and by focusing on energy-burdened homeowners, it's a win-win. The Heights is going to be all electric heating and cooling. We also are working through updating our sustainable building ordinance. This is something that Kurt Schultz is leading. The SBO applies to all new city buildings, new private buildings that receive more than $200,000 in public funds. We are just getting started on an update for that ordinance as well. Doing a lot in
Just a
transportation.
note, sorry, Ms. Boyer,
Yes.
since I might have been the last one to figure this out, but to my colleagues, the presentation that we got printed out is stapled backwards, so if you turn it over, you're lost. Looks like I was the last one to figure that out, but just in case. Thanks, Ms. Boyer.
Story of my life. It would be mine that gets stapled backwards.
To keep us on our toes, it's good.
Okay, so our EV car share, the largest municipally owned car share, electric car share in the United States. Aaron keeps that operating smoothly and efficiently, and there's never any wrinkles or hiccups with any of it. It's a partnership between the city of Minneapolis and the city of St. Paul that it's actually run by the nonprofit Our Car. We also are installing EV chargers across the city. Let's see, do I have a picture of one? Not really where you can see, but there's a public, one of the chargers is public and one of the chargers is for EV. Another big accomplishment, is Jimmy still here, is our new bikeway installation across the city, trying to make it easier for people to not use cars as frequently as they can. And just, you all know the Climate Justice Advisory Board, so just a reminder that all of this is overseen by the Climate Justice Advisory Board, CJAB, making sure that equity and inclusion are centered in all of our work. Okay, so just one last plug for the dashboard, because all of this and more is there. So CARP 2.0, one of the action items in the CARP was to complete an update every 5 years. Things in this sector are changing really quickly, so there already is emerging science and emerging technology. So we wanted to update the plan overall. I also, at the beginning, mentioned that the current plan has 170 actions in it. We wanted to have some kind of a way to focus our work down. So as a part of the update process, we also decided to develop an accompanying 5-year action plan that would help us to guide our work over the next 5 years. We had technical support from fabulous local firm, Local Climate Solutions. If you like the writing in the plan, which I adore the writing in the plan, you can thank Abby Finnis from Local Climate Solutions, because she really did a lot of the drafting and she's a brilliant writer. And Wilder Research helped us with some community engagement support. So for that community engagement, CJAB, you'll see here, had a CARP Update Advisory Committee. CJOB has had 3 areas of focus over the last year. One was the Rethinking I-94 project, which resulted in a comprehensive decision memo that they passed on to all of you. Their second area of focus was this CARP Update Advisory Committee. And then their third area going into this next year too is an energy burden subcommittee to help us implement and focus our work to help alleviate those who are most energy burdened. So the CARP Update Advisory Committee, in addition to CJAB members, we had 26 members from across the community. They met almost monthly for most of last year. They showed up, they were engaged, they were connected. It was a really great group. They learned, they advocated, they guided us as we were thinking about how to organize the plan. They supported us when we got discouraged because it's such a massive undertaking. The engagement activities that we undertook, we had a web survey, we had engagement at community events, we had listening sessions, we had the 2025 climate forum, and then we had a community conversation toolkit, which we knew we wouldn't be able to get to all block clubs, district councils, church committees who wanted to talk about this and provide input. So we created this toolkit, which was essentially a 6-page overview of climate change in general, climate change in St. Paul, overview about the planning process, guides about having difficult conversations, and then really specific instructions for how they could get feedback back to us. And we ended up getting about 20 responses through that community conversation toolkit as well. Throughout all of these forms of engagement, we asked people what were they already experiencing and or concerned about. We asked, what do community members want to see in a sustainable city? We asked what already exists in our communities that we at the city might not know about, and how there is some way that we could engage or better support it. And then we asked really specifically, what should we prioritize in this 5-year action plan? One thing that we made sure to talk about in all of these conversations was the city's ability to influence versus the city's ability to control. In a lot of these areas, the cities, as you all very well know, our actual ability to control is limited, and we didn't want people to think we were going to come out with a plan to do things that we actually can't do. So we talked a lot about control versus influence throughout all of the engagement. So what did we hear through the community engagement? We heard that people wanted us to prioritize healthy communities. There's concern about air quality and extreme heat. There is support for active transportation facilities across the city. We heard people's thoughts on resilience and preparedness. People are worried about the financial impacts of climate change. There's a lot of support for resilience hubs, community-led initiatives. We also heard that people, especially, for example, at the climate forum, Councilmember Johnson was there and can attest to this firsthand too, that people afterwards said to us, I had no idea the city was doing all that. I didn't know this, I didn't know this. So we heard from people, we want more communication, we want more information about what's happening and about what we personally can do. Support for clean and efficient energy, low impact transportation, and then we heard a lot about recycling and trash management as well. So we took all of that community engagement at the same time that all of this was happening. We were having really focused and intentional conversations with our city colleagues across all departments. We asked our colleagues, what are you working on? The 5 of us consider ourselves to be the climate core, but there are people who also would say that climate and resilience and sustainability is a focus of their work. So we made sure to incorporate, what do you think should be prioritized in the next 5 years? Which of these actions do you know we're not going to be able to get to in the next 5 years, so we shouldn't even put it in our 5-year action plan? So we were doing all of that as well. So the plan that came out of this is a result of that work. The first kind of piece of it, there's context. There's a really great page about our vision for 2050. Also, I should say it's not pretty yet. It's just the content. We haven't done any of the formatting. There's going to be a lot of maps and charts and images to be added. There's overview of climate change. There is more detail on projected local impacts, and then more about climate hazards, what we know is more likely to happen here, and populations who are especially vulnerable for those hazards. There's a lot of focus on that. The meat of the plan is our objectives, targets, and actions. Each one of those categories includes equitable outcomes, you'll see, and these are the 8 categories. We had originally thought that we could keep the same categories from the CARP and just kind of refresh some of the language. As we got through the conversations and we're talking with people, implementation, funding, and partnerships is such a key part of it, and the actions were kind of spread throughout the plan in the currently adopted CARP, so we decided we really needed to pull all that together. We didn't have a separate community resilience section either, and nature-based solutions is also a new category. So those are the objectives, targets, and actions are organized around those categories, and then we have the 5-year action plan, which we ended up with 25 priority actions. They're organized by the same categories as the overall plan, and each of those priority action items includes the following details: the control versus influence piece, where the project would be located, the departments that would lead it, what kind of a project is it, a brief summary, anticipated funding need, anticipated funding sources, potential project partners, and then the time frame. So it kind of just gives a little bit of an overview, more details than you'll see with some of the other actions that didn't get included in the 25 priority actions. This is an example of initiative number 1. And I chose to highlight this as the example because it's a pretty important one, and all the other priority action items and kind of the implementation of the plan in general will come back to how we collectively decide to fund climate action in the city of St. Paul. So we're proposing that we adopt a target to spend at least 1% of the city's budget on climate actions. Bless you. While this funding would be supported by other capital expenditures, we think it's critical to be able to identify the climate funding that we're allocating to this issue. So for the 2026 budget, that would be about $8.8 million. Depending on, we have never done kind of an overall assessment of climate funding because a lot of this work is woven into other things that the city does. We think, depending on how we define climate funding, resilience, sustainability funding, we're probably pretty close to this amount already. You'll also see that we have another action that isn't in the 5-year action plan, but we have another action where we say the city would strive to identify external funding and grant sources to match this amount as well.
Sorry, Ms. Joseph.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you, Ms. Boyer. So with this goal of 1%, so that would be 1% each year, is my understanding of the city's budget. But then would there also, I have 2 questions. Would there also be just, you mentioned other funding sources. Would there be another goal of this is how much total money that we need? And then my question is, does that amount, either the city amount or additional funding we need, is that enough funding to actually meet the goals of what we're trying to achieve?
Council President, Councilmember Jost, thank you for that question. Yes, there would be other goals. We are constantly going after external funding to achieve other goals. Number 2, no. We have not done an overall assessment of what implementing every single action on the plan would cost, but it would be a lot more than $16 million, which would be if we would have 1% from the budget and then, a goal to match 1%. Again, it's hard because it depends on how we define it. So the Hamlin Library, for example, that's however many millions of dollars construction project that is overall. There's an EV charger there. There is geothermal there. I can't remember if there's solar. There's solar there too. So would we parse out, we wouldn't say that whole project is a climate project. But you can see how it would get pretty weedy in the details if you go through and try. This is my personal bias, is that I feel like we could spend a lot of time doing that, and I think we should think about it as a guide instead of we're going to get down to the cent here.
I think I agree, that would take a lot of analysis. I do think that there is somewhere in the middle where we can make sure that we have enough funding to achieve these goals, just because of how critical that they are to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. And so I would just want to know that we're, and I also understand that I'm thinking that total cost is much more than what the city can afford alone. But just knowing that we're on track, I understand, a lot of our overall plans, like our bike plan, in the same way, we haven't done an assessment for how much that's going to cost or projected that out. But it would be helpful just to have a better sense of where it puts us, just with how critical that this work is.
Council President, Councilmember Jost, thank you. And we actually have started to do that. So these are the 25 priority actions here, organized by category that they are in the plan. And for each of these 25, we do have an estimated funding. We have an estimated cost and potential funding sources. Some is city budget, some is partners, some is, potential grant sources that are also out there. So a good first step towards that could be, we could just add this up. Like, here's how much we estimate the 25 priority actions would cost to implement. Here's the, kind of our expected range of funding, cost across funding sources for that too, just to kind of give us a ballpark. Because I appreciate what you're saying. Like, the scale is so enormous. How do we organize our thinking about it?
Yeah, that's super helpful, just even that information.
Yeah.
Ms. Yang.
Thanks, Council President. Thank you for the presentation. I'm wondering, CARP 2.0, is that something that's available online already?
Yes, so Council President, Council Member, yes, you have a draft of hot off the presses.
Okay.
We have on our Engage St. Paul site, we posted the draft back in November. We had some community groups who have been really involved in the process and wanted to see the draft. So we posted largely the version that you have in front of you. We have been incorporating some feedback as we go, so what you have is more updated than what's online right now. The mayor's office also just completed a review and had some, thankfully, not too drastic feedback. So that has been incorporated into the version that you see as well, and will replace the version that's online with this version now. But yes, it's out there, and we have heard from people. We're kind of wanting to have conversations about it as it goes along. So we've heard from community groups, should we wait to comment until there's a public hearing so that it can be documented in the record? And yes, I understand that. And we're here and wanting to have conversations with you now. So if you have, we've been telling our community groups and our advisory board and other, individuals who are interested, if you're seeing things that, like, big gaps, if you're seeing things that you think aren't what we talked about reflected, please let us know. And largely what we've heard from people is compliments and a request to give them a date by which you all would need to hear their feedback. But to your point from earlier, we're trying to make sure that the draft that comes forward is not a surprise to anyone, incorporates big picture feedback from across the city as well as our community partners.
Very good, thank you. I have a few more questions. Thank you, Council President. Well, thank you so much for sending or having the draft online. I look forward to going and reading through it and looking at the 25 priority actions here. It is very aligned with what I've been hearing community members share about what they want for the future of climate and resiliency in our city. Also very aligned with where I would want us to go to. And so I want to thank you, the staff and the CJAB, also community members who've been very engaged in this process, because it is a huge heavy lifting to be able to even produce, turn everything into a plan. And so I just really commend you all. I'm wondering, just like in terms of the priority actions, I see a few things here that are I would say very related to some of the bigger issues that have come up in my ward, like with Northern Iron and the pollution, the health impacts that have occurred to generations of families in the east side here that also have gone, I would say, acknowledged, not acknowledged until as recently. And so I'm wondering, is there anywhere in here other than air quality sensors? Are there ways in which you like, an issue like Northern Iron would be covered as part of the priority actions? And then the other question I have is I'm wondering whether the plan to expand EV car share charging stations to the greater east side is still on track to happen too.
Council President, Councilmember Yang, yes, the air quality sensor item is, I would say, inclusive of the Northern Iron, and there's a couple across the city that we talked a lot about, both the health implications as well as, again, the city control versus influence piece of it, and then the overall regulatory structure. I don't think we actually had someone from the MPCA come and talk, but we talked about it at length at our advisory committees too. That was a piece of it. The other piece of it really was around the Rethinking I-94 project, which led our internal groups and the city to think kind of, more broadly across the city, like where are our highway corridors and what are the concerns here, and what's the science, what's the emerging science on it. And the third piece that I would say really came up in the air quality talks was the wildfires. That summer, it was the Canadian wildfires that really impacted us here. And as you all know, our ability to directly influence any of those three things as the city is limited. So the idea being that we would partner, we would put air quality sensors where we can, we would gather data, we'd gather information, and then use that to influence the decision makers who can directly influence it.
Thank you.
And you had a second question.
About EV car share.
Oh, EV car share. Yeah, we are super excited about expanding EV car share. There was a recent win where we got some of the funding that the federal government was attempting to claw back was reallocated to us. So high five all around. It is central. The EV car share program, I would say, is central to our efforts and goals of reducing vehicle miles traveled across the city. The other thing that I would say about it is it was created under a different set of circumstances than we have right now. Some of the insurance, some of the maintenance, some of the cost pressures that we're trying to figure out how to address in an ongoing program didn't exist in the same way when it was created. So how are we going to adapt? We came to you all for one-time funding to help fill a gap that our car had, so thank you for that. And this is conversations that we're having going forward. How do we structure this program to be sustainable for the long term and also serve people who might not have access to other car share opportunities and expand it on the east side as well, yeah.
Okay. Oh, can you just confirm for me, like the efforts to try and expand to the greater east side, that's still happening? Is that
right? The whole thing
okay.
was reinstated. Yes,
okay,
the whole project. The whole project
Wonderful.
Was the clawback was unsuccessful.
Okay, thank you. And then just the last question that I have is, I'm wondering if it has been conversations around partnership with the county, because some of the items here, especially around waste and the furniture reuse center, like those are things that the county can lead on and we can have a stronger partnership with them on. And so can you speak a bit to that too?
Sure. Council President, Councilmember Yang, absolutely. We had representatives from Ramsey County on our CARP Update Advisory Committee. We have monthly, if not more frequent, check-ins with our partners over there at Ramsey County. They've gone through a little bit of a restructuring of their climate and resiliency office as well. Yes, they were really involved in the process of it. We have ongoing active partnerships with them both in waste management and recycling as well as workforce. That's a action item that's in here as well and is addressed in the content to talking about how this collaborative committee, the Green Jobs Committee, really evolved out of an ad hoc relationship that city representatives had with county representatives as well, knowing that they have the programs and the funding and we have the need to make sure that whatever our climate goals are, we need to have trained solar installers. We need to have electricians who can come in and electrify everything that we want to electrify. And so being sure to work with them through our full stack collaborative with the city. There's all kinds of things going on at PED. Exactly, this is one of these things that could be another hour-long conversation. So yes and yes.
Thank you.
Ms. Jost, and then Ms. Bowie.
Yeah, I just thank you so much for your presentation. I was just wondering if you could share kind of the timeline of, I look forward to reading this, but when you would like feedback from us and what we're looking like for the schedule for adoption, like what is that schedule and timeline look like?
Council President, Councilmember Jost, thank you for that. I will say we have extended the timeline a couple times. We had originally intended to bring it to you for adoption last fall, and then decided to do another round of going back to city departments, because we heard a lot of things from them initially. We felt like we incorporated that feedback, but we wanted to do another round of going back to make sure that what we have in here was accurate. So we delayed to do that. Then the mayoral election happened, and we decided to delay a little further again to make sure that incoming Mayor Herr had a chance to weigh in and feel ownership, over the plan as well. So we delayed that. Assistant Mayor Nick Stumo-Langer I have briefed him, and he's provided his feedback on the plan as well, which has been incorporated. So I feel like we met that. So I guess I would send it back to you all and say, how, like a month? Should we plan to reconvene in a month? Should we plan to do it a little longer than that? And the other caveat that I would add to that is the reason that we feel okay about continuing to delay the plan adoption is because, number one, a lot of the things that are in here are already happening. We're working on a lot of these action items, so it isn't a case of where we're waiting for the plan to be adopted before we can do anything. Number two, really creating this updated plan has been, to me, a part of the climate action process for the city in and of itself. At each of our conversations that we had with folks, people said, thank you so much for just being here and having this. I think about this all the time, and it's so hard to connect with my neighbors about it. So thank you. So we've kind of used it as an excuse, or a tool to get that feedback as well. And then thirdly, just to make sure that it represents what your goals and your visions are as well. I think all of those reasons are worth taking the time to make sure that we get it right.
Okay, so it sounds like it's very close to being ready to go, basically. I guess maybe we can talk about it. I'm just going to throw out end of March out there at the latest, but
Great.
I don't know. I do think we should adopt it, soon.
Good.
And ideally for us, the summer and the budget starts to get busy. So I'm just gonna. Those are my thoughts.
Council President, Councilmember, thank you. That would align really well. So the only pieces that we're still waiting on, we have been, for some of the targets, how we're going to measure our progress, we have been going back and forth with Excel Energy, wanting them to provide the data in a format that's usable to us. And I feel like we're getting close now to getting that and being able to update those targets. And then once we have that, we'll be able to do the mapping and the charts and kind of the visual pieces of it. But we didn't really want to start down that process until we know that there was general, agreement and support about the overall structure of it. So if we kind of have a target of the end of March, that would give us plenty of time to get those things done and to get an actual polished final version of it ready to bring back.
Sounds good. I like end of March, and it sounds like you can take our feedback today, and then we would be ready to see it whenever you're ready to bring it. And I agree with Ms. Jo's sense of urgency about it. Ms. Bowie, I'm going to jump in quickly after that, and then Ms. Yang.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this work. I agree that we can have series of follow-up, particularly around each item here. But as someone who represents Ward 1 and also has a metal refinery in my ward that been having so many environmental hazards and impacting the health conditions, particularly this refinery is right next door to our Frogtown Farm, which is like the largest public farm actually in the country. And when I think about just all of the advocacy that's been going on over the years, bringing attention to it, I definitely hear you in terms of like what we could have control or influence over. But with my role and my position, it's really important that we at least take some type of position around we do not stand or tolerate this level of pollution. And there are some relationships that we can make at the state level to actually hold some of these companies accountable. I really want to lean into that. I have a question particularly, and I don't see it on here, and I'm not to put you on the spot, but particularly around the community resilience segment of the plan. And I know we are leading with equity, but it's also concerning to me, and I'm just saying this in terms of someone who fights on the intersection of climate justice and environmental justice and racial justice, that we don't have in here like assessment of race, of income, and also health impacts. Particularly, coming from Rondo, we understand in my neighborhood that it is like talking about transportation is also talking about racial justice and how I-94 was a freeway that was built and uprooted African American neighborhood and corridor. And then we have it in Frogtown, a refinery that's in a predominantly community of color, that's polluting that neighborhood, and all the health impacts that we have seen, whether it's across race, our incomes, is very important to highlight. So I'm just curious to know, as you are creating this community resilience plan, where is the, I guess the investment in terms of also advocating around like racial justice is really important. I know we have a reparations commission. I think this is something I think this would be great for them to also review this plan, because they can maybe bring some partners. But if there's already partners that you're working with, I don't know if, the relationship with the Reconnect Rondo, but I know they've done an extensive amount of research on this topic. But I'm just curious, particularly, just to piggyback off of Councilmember Yang's question, aside from like the air quality sensors, where are we really getting a clear picture from the city around, where this is having some racial targeting, and harms, particularly in our communities of color?
Council President, Councilmember Bowie, do you have the actual plan or just my, okay.
I have this plan.
The actual plan, not just the slides.
Oh, no, I don't have, or actually I do.
Okay,
Oh, okay.
Okay, so, so in the introductory part, before you get to the targets and actions there, starting on page 18, there is a section about climate vulnerabilities. And this is where we do that analysis, largely relying on the county's vulnerability assessment that they just recently completed. And these are the maps and the features that we want to make them prettier, to be honest with you, before we put them in there. But this is where we talk about all of those. So you can see urban heat and the heat island effect. We list out the specific neighborhoods where this is a primary concern. We talk about vulnerable populations and why they are exceptionally vulnerable to that particular hazard. And then in addition to people, we have sections where we talk about the natural system potential implications or vulnerabilities from that hazard, and the infrastructure vulnerabilities from that hazard. So you can see we go through, we talk about the environmental justice communities too, but this is the part, and again, this could be another whole hour too, going through the assessment of the hazards and the vulnerabilities. The way that I talk about it, like in our community meetings, is I say, we know what the hazards are. It's warmer summers, it's warmer winters, it's more extreme heat, and then more weather extremes. And then we give examples of all of that. And then we say, if you are already vulnerable, you have asthma, you are more vulnerable to this particular hazard that is a result of climate change. And here are the reasons why. And a lot of it's all connected with socioeconomic and racial and the historic injustices in our neighborhoods, you're absolutely right. So we have a whole section where we talk about that and address it. Then you will see these are the 25 priority action items, but there are lots of other actions, bless you, throughout the plan as well. If there are some that you feel should be lifted out of their particular section and added to the 5-year actions, we would love to have more conversation with you about. That's exactly the kind of feedback we're hoping to get. And I would be happy to meet with anyone between now and March, whatever the best process is to do that. We're here and excited and willing.
I just have one more follow-up too. Thank you so much for, I did not see this, so thank you so much. I'll take some time to review this and to add to it, but I just wanted to expand particularly around, the importance of having, a framework or a lens around like public health. I know the conversations that's happening in my community now is around like life expectancy rates, to where if you, depending on what zip code you are born in, like your life expectancy can be shortened or expand. And we understand these hazards have a huge role to play on that. And also, I would be curious to know just like what are the partners that you are working with, particularly around the public health, because there's an understanding of like what the hazards are, but then there's what does repair looks like, what does like solutions look like, what does resiliency, and I think I understand with the city, we normalize resiliency conversations or resiliency plans, and that's really essential. But I don't want to have a community like being prepared or normalizing these hazards. I advocate for a community, particularly around how do we, get polluters out of our communities, right? How do we have a zero tolerance around, organizations or companies that are literally poisoning our communities, and like having stronger regulations around enforcing that. So, and I understand that's part of the work as well, but I think the reframing is really important. Just because, there's education that's really valuable and aware, but, like what do we do with that education is really important as well. But yeah, I look forward to having more conversations with you all. I know like Frogtown Neighborhood Association, has been champions in this work, and also with Reconnect Rondo and some of the work that they're doing with the Rethinking I-94 is really important, particularly around what does reparative justice looks like for a neighborhood that has been, impacted by environmental injustices. So thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Bowie. So go ahead, Ms. Boyer.
I don't see the time.
We are very close.
We're very close to, so Council President, Councilmember Bowie, I will just super briefly, I will say Reconnect Rondo was a part of our advisory committee. Frogtown Farms, we have a joint funded project with them. I presented with them at a University of St. Thomas project this year where we're working on getting St. Thomas students there to help them. Yeah, well, that's a whole nother hour. But what I would say is Ramsey County's climate office is actually in their public health division. And so the conversations that we have with our Ramsey County partners are all very much framed under the public health. And increasingly, if you look like, at climate work in general as kind of a sector, it is coming more under public health now, just for the reasons that you mentioned. So just absolutely look forward to talking more.
Thanks so much for that answer and those questions, Ms. Bowie. I had a similar question, which I'll articulate in a moment. I first just want to say I really do appreciate this, and I also want to shout out to our former Chief Resilience Officer, Russ Stark, who I see is in the dedication here, but I think his fingerprints are all over this. I feel like his spirit is in the room right now. Maybe he's one of our millions of viewers even watching right now. But really it is, I appreciate the call out to his leadership for getting us to this point. Two quick comments, and I also want to echo my colleagues' thanks. This is such an important, this comes up probably, besides potholes, the number 2 thing that we hear about in the City Council is climate resiliency. So really appreciate the work, and I know this matters deeply to a lot of our residents. The 2 comments, one, to Councilmember Bowie's point, I had the same question, specifically related to a part of my ward, the Southport neighborhood, which is it's on the west side, but it's also a particularly impacted area of the west side. And I see that on page 23. I see the darker colors, kind of combining the high impact because of the vulnerability of the population to the pollution and the other factors. I think what I'm not seeing in this plan, and this is something I've struggled with in trying to work with my Southport constituents, is we call out the neighborhoods that are most vulnerable and impacted, and we talk about prioritizing them. But then when we have our 25 priority actions, I'm not sure I see how we are going to prioritize those neighborhoods with these actions. So I felt like I've sort of been, beating my head against a wall a little bit, saying, hey, Southport is a neighborhood that is particularly, this is one of those vulnerable neighborhoods we're talking about, and getting, city staff's attention on this in a heightened way has taken a lot of explanation. Whereas if Southport and other neighborhoods, and again, I think maybe more fine-grained than Hamlin Midway, downtown, West Side, I think the more specific we can be, the better. If those were listed somewhere and there was a corollary tie to, and therefore, if you're on this list, you're going to get X, Y, and Z action from the priority list, then those of us who are trying to advocate for those communities wouldn't feel quite as much like we were sort of raising an alarm that hadn't already been raised, if that makes sense. So I would love to see that direct tie-in in the plan. And again, the more fine-grained we can be, the better. And the second comment is I love the tree canopy, increasing the tree canopy coverage. I think there's a huge miss here that it doesn't talk about the tree preservation ordinance that we're working on. It's a huge opportunity. I would love to see the plan either at least talk about it, take a position on it. I hope it's favorable, but either way, just not to sort of let that not be said in the tree canopy coverage, because that's going to be a huge initiative happening this year.
I think it's in the intro, but not, thank you, Council President, thank you.
I just dove right to the page 51.
That's great.
I'm sure you have a lot, we can talk more about that, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to let those comments stand and go to my colleagues. So Ms. Yang and then Ms. Jost.
Thanks, Council President. I just want to go back to the slide about the city's climate fund. Can you clarify to us, and just for some context, like I remember this being brought up by Nido St. Paul members, many of who live in the east side, when we had conversations around whether we were going to add on more months to the franchise fees, and then the budget season last year too. So like my recollection of where the advocacy happened for this for like the 1% was from them, and I am very pleased to see this on the slide here and grateful that you highlighted that. I'm just wondering, can you clarify to us, should we interpret this as a way where for this initiative we're saying it as if we are starting from scratch, where we're not putting any dollars from franchise fees into climate work yet, or should we consider that we actually do have a portfolio of investments in climate, like power of healthy homes, power of homes, and even like positions related to climate too?
Council President, Council Member, we are not thinking that this would be starting from scratch. Absolutely, we are thinking that this would include just that the 1% would be kind of an overall guide. Budget conversations up till now have been, climate is important. We should put money towards it. We should put money towards it. And this, we are putting this out there just as a suggestion for kind of an overall guide. Let's aim to have this much of our budget dedicated towards it. And again, it opens up a can of worms of definitions, because all those programs that you mentioned and more do contribute to the 1%.
Okay, well, for me personally, it would be helpful to know, like, where are we at in terms of the 1% here? How far are we in reaching that? I'm not sure if it would be something that comes from you or in your team, or if it's OFS, but that'd be really helpful going into the budget season for this year.
Thanks, Ms. Yang. Ms. Jost, and I think we'll let you, Ms. Boyer, give any closing remarks.
Thanks, Councilmember Yang, for your comments too. I guess like my expectation would be that the 2027 budget would have at least $8.8 million directed towards these initiatives. That would be my expectation, and I look forward to working with the mayor on that. I wanted to just comment on some of Councilmember Bowie and Councilmember Yang's questions about, the foundries and the pollution in their wards, and then I guess similar to your comment as well, some of these areas with more concentrated lower air quality. I think being able to tie together what we can actually do, what the actions are, is important, because it's my understanding that a lot of those things are regulated by the MPCA, and not what can we actually do. So whatever that might be would be important, or whether it is mostly just partnerships with other groups and our state our state delegation and other people that can have influence, that would be helpful. But that's kind of my understanding of how some of that works. And then I also, I was also just gonna uplift what you said about Ramsey County and all the information that they have that Councilmember Bowie was asking about. There's one map. Maybe there's more maps in there, but I mean, I feel like there are dozens of maps. They have so much information and data, and through their, climate action and their public health group. And so as much as we can partner with them, I'm sure we already do, because that's a big part of what they do and information that they already have. So if we can even, collaborate that with them and pull it and blow up St. Paul and look at it at even more detail, which I'm sure is what we already do, but that's, I think, what would be really helpful too.
And get curbside composting. Sorry, I digress.
2 years. 2 years.
It's like free beer tomorrow. It's always 2 years from now. Okay, sorry. Ms. Boyer, would you like to close?
The Council President, Council members, thank you so much for your attention and support. And I am here. All of us are here. We're happy to continue the conversation, answer any questions, take any additional feedback or specifics. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We look forward to seeing this on or before end of March. It sounds like we have direction from Ms. Jost, and we really appreciate it. Thanks so much, everyone. We are adjourned.